Further debate? The member for Nepean Carleton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure on behalf of Tim Hudak and the Ontario Progressive Conservative Caucus to speak to anti-bullying initiatives in Ontario, and in particular to legislation placed before us. I'd like to first start by welcoming Karen Stripe and Gail Burkett from the Canadian Federation of University Women. They are here in support of the Anti-Bullying Coalition, a coalition that I will be speaking about this afternoon. An important topic of late, bullying has become further pronounced than it has ever been experienced by members of this chamber. Cyberbullying, text threats, and the sad reality that today's bullying has taken on a greater severity and viciousness is evidence why this Assembly needs to act, and to act in a decisive, holistic, and nonpartisan manner. For some time now, several members of this Assembly have drawn attention to the plight of bully students and have proposed a variety of ideas that could bring awareness to bullying and also to prevent it. One member in particular who has devoted such energy is Elizabeth Whitmer, the MPP for Kitchener-Waterloo. Mrs. Whitmer is a former minister and critic of education, but Speaker, she is also a former teacher and a former board chair. I would like to commend the member for her important and substantive work in anti-bullying initiatives in this House. There are also a number of other Ontarians who have committed their attention to eradicating bullying. While it is impossible to mention all of them, let me share with you and this House some of the initiatives that are occurring at a grassroots level. In Ottawa, Magic 100 FM has taken a leading role with their No More Bullies campaign. Led by on-air personalities Stuart Schwartz, known to most of us as Stuntman Stu, Trish Owens, and Angie Poirier, the No More Bullies campaign has been raising awareness in schools and throughout a rather unique outreach program. Speaker, they have celebrities, pro athletes, politicians, and everyday Ontarians write "No More Bullies" on their hand, to take a picture of it with their face, and to stick it on a Facebook campaign so kids know there is support there. By having Ottawa Senators owner Eugene Melnick, Canadian band Simple Plan, Canadian singing sensation Carly Rae Jepsen, and even a few MPPs like myself and the member from Ottawa Centre participate, Stuntman Stu's team is telling students it is not okay to bully. It is not cool. But, Mr. Speaker, even more importantly, Stu, Angie, and Trish are letting kids who are bullied know that they are not alone. My friend Colin McSweeney often says of bullying, and I'm going to quote him, "We need to make bullying taboo and socially unacceptable the same way drinking and driving became intolerable 25 years ago." That's exactly the type of activism that Stuntman Stu and his team are doing on air and in Ottawa schools to end bullying. Another group in Ottawa, the Bengals football team, is also thinking outside the box when it comes to bullying. They want to rehabilitate the bullies. Their Be a Bengal, Not a Bully program is smart, it's accessible, and it's productive. For their program, the Royal Ottawa Hospital made them an Inspiration Award recipient this past year. Let me read about this program, Speaker, and I quote, "Since 2008, Bengal players, coaches, parents, and managers have been united in their fight against bullying on both the field and off the field. This youth-led initiative brings the anti-bullying message to an ideal place for maximum impact, the football field. The program began with a simple anti-bullying policy developed and written by the young players themselves, and has since grown into a core component of Bengal organization. Be a Bengal, not a bully, identifies and supports leaders from within the team who participate as peer mentors for the program. For the Bengals, the message is clear. Bullying will not be tolerated." It's impressive, given it's coming from young football players. These are just two examples of anti-bullying campaigns in Ontario. Parents and students have literally come together across the province and have created a vast network of support, awareness, and lobbying. I would like to acknowledge a few of those, if I may, Mr. Speaker. Lisa McDougall and Karen Cameron are the co-founders of Blue Water Citizens for Education. Karina Morrison is the co-founder of the London Anti-Bullying Coalition. Katie New is the co-founder of Bullying Canada. Karen Sebin is the co-founder of the York Region Anti-Bullying Coalition. And Ann Taylor is the chair of the St. Thomas Elgin Anti-Bullying Coalition. They have done outstanding work pointing out the seriousness of bullying in our communities. Each of them have been directly affected by those impacts. Each of those who I mentioned today can speak to why Ontario needs a strong and comprehensive anti-bullying law that will complement the work they are doing on the front line. Awareness isn't enough anymore. I have come to learn that firsthand. It is not as simple to say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. That is facile, it is ill-informed, and a poor excuse for turning a blind eye to the truth. Let me read a headline from the Ottawa Citizen, October 27th. For those at home and who are here today listening to this debate, I just want you to know this will disturb you. Jamie was forced to switch schools in grade 7 after a group of 4 or 5 students forced flashlight batteries down Jamie's throat while they were on a school bus. That's not sticks and stones. It's not name-calling. It's torture. It's torment. It's unacceptable in a civilized society. So those who think we needn't enact legislation to protect Ontario students from this type of cruelty might be unaware that bullying has been a factor in some Ontario students and their decision to take their own lives as a result of bullying. Some students have chosen to die by suicide because they felt that the bullying would never stop. Bullying in these cases so deplorable that the student bullied reaches the depths of despair and cannot see a better day. Now that boy I just told you about that had the batteries shoved down his throat was Jamie Hubley. And sadly, in Jamie's case, it took his suicide for the bullying to stop. Jamie's story has received international attention. And I can tell you, Speaker, I will personally never forget learning and where I learned and where I was when I found out he died. I think of him every time I see his mother and father. I felt when he died that there must be something I could do. I know I'm not the only one who feels that way. Edmund Burke, the great British philosopher, once said, and I'll quote him, "All that is required for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing." Knowing what we know about Jamie's tragic experience, the good people in this place cannot turn a blind eye to bullying. We cannot do nothing about this problem. We cannot ignore bullying in our schools and on our school buses. It is simply not an option. I genuinely believe this House collectively wants to do something. How else to explain Bills 13 and Bills 14 being introduced on the exact same day by both the government and the opposition to eradicate bullying? It's now generally accepted that there is a problem with bullying, or as Burke put it, an evil that we have to deal with. The question now becomes how we triumph, or in plainer terms, how we fix that problem. I've contemplated this very question in my mind countless times since Jamie died. I've personally gone through all of the emotions as well. I've been angry, I've been sad, I've been shocked, And then I've been angry again. I'm angry because Ontario students can feel so isolated and distressed as a result of bullying in one of our public schools that he had felt that there was no other avenue than to take his own life. I've spoken a great deal about Jamie in this House, Mr. Speaker, to share his story and to remind Ontarians that bullying today has gone too far. The even more dreadful fact is Jamie's story is not the only one. It's just the one that I know most personally because his parents are my friends. Mitchell Wilson was only 11 years old when he took his own life because he didn't want to testify in court against his bully. According to the DurhamRegion.com, Mitchell's dad said he was taking one of the walks prescribed for his treatment of muscular dystrophy last November when he was mugged by an older boy intent on taking an iPhone. The attack was the start of a downward spiral for Mitchell, who was bullied by other kids and fearful of having to go to court to testify. In words that can only be defined as heart-shattering, Speaker, Mitchell's grandmother said this: "It isn't okay to be a little disabled kid and get away with it." A weeping Mrs. Wilson said, "It's not right. Broke my heart. Lose my grandson. He was my only grandchild, and now he's gone. It's horrible." Since being named PC Education Critic, I've encountered countless parents, some of whom I mentioned here today, and all of whom have shared their personal stories of anguish. Stories of how their children were beaten, berated, and bullied because they were different. Different. They were bullied because they were different. Each story has brought with it a quote-unquote cause, if you will, why their son or daughter was bullied. Jamie was targeted because he was a figure skater. As he got older, it was because he questioned his sexuality. He was the only openly gay in his school, openly gay kid in his school, so the bullies targeted him. In Mitchell's case, he was bullied because he had muscular dystrophy. Speaker, my grandfather died of muscular dystrophy. I know how that disease can ravage your body while your mind is still there, take away your mobility and your ability to act. He could not defend himself, Mr. Speaker, from that cruel disease. This boy physically could not fight back. The physically weakest of the weak, bullied because he had a deadly disease. Others are targeted because of a learning disorder or their weight. I've heard stories of kids being bullied because of their economic circumstances, mercilessly punished because the other kids considered them poor. Still others have been made fun of and intimidated at school because of their religion. Having faith in the Almighty should not be a reason in Canada for derision, contempt, or of mockery. But sadly, on our school grounds, it's as if anything can go. Bullying takes many forms, and there is not only one cause. An important point for us to remember throughout this debate. Now, Speaker, this brings me to the legislation before us. We know on November 30th, the Liberal government introduced Bill 13, and the PC opposition, of which I'm a proud member, and through the member for Kitchener-Waterloo, introduced Bill 14. It was a significant day in my mind. There was certainly consensus among legislators that bullying had reached a tipping point in Ontario, and further, there was agreement that something needed to be done. Before us were two bills, both different, but as I've said in the past, complementary, not competing. We had a golden opportunity in this minority parliament to do something momentous. We had an opportunity to put students first, not ideology. We could have done the right thing by bringing the best and brightest minds of this Assembly together while setting partisanship aside for the good and the safety of our students. We could have had the strongest anti-bullying legislation in North America, but Speaker, sadly, I'm not so sure that can happen now. I dare say we missed a golden opportunity. I'm disappointed the government was not confident enough in the good minds and ideas that this legislature can bring to do the right thing, and that their insecurity of losing control of the agenda has gotten the better of them. And I do believe Bill 14 is of higher quality than Bill 13.
No question.
On November 30th, as the PC opposition critic, I said of Bills 13 and 14, as PC education critic, I said this: we will be serious about passing anti-bullying legislation, starting, of course, with Mrs. Whitmer's bill, and ending, of course, with the government's legislation, because we believe that measures included in both those bills will make Ontario the leader in North America in anti-bullying legislation. Further extending that olive branch, on December 1st, I told the Ottawa Citizen, and I quote, "We have offered to merge the two bills, and I'm sure we'll merge them in committee. Everybody in the legislature is on the same page. There's merit in both bills, and there's tremendous political will behind this. I support the Premier on this." Perhaps I should have been clearer. I support the desire to eradicate bullying, but I also believe we must take this task seriously. If we get this bill wrong, Speaker, the kids suffer. This isn't about headlines.
Shouldn't be.
It's about getting it right. Listen to what Karen Sebin has to say. I introduced her earlier from the York Region Anti-Bullying Coalition. This is her quote: "My son's 3 years of bullying took the form of homophobia. As parents, it didn't matter to us what form the bullying took. The fact remains the aggression and the assault was taking place regardless of the reason. This is the focus of any anti-bullying legislation, and PC's Elizabeth Whitmer got it right with Bill 14. A strong endorsement by Ms. Sebin of Bill 14 and not Bill 13. You're aware, Speaker, that I approached the government to have them seriously consider getting their bill right and using the minority parliament to all of our advantage. We had the opportunity to do something revolutionary here by using obscure legislative tools to bring our biggest and brightest ideas together. I have personally lobbied this government for months to pause second reading so we could create a process that would send both bills immediately to committee to merge. And for months, I thought the negotiations were moving along. That was until late last week, when the government unilaterally put this bill on the table and on the order paper so we couldn't continue our negotiations. Ontario students should have been given the confidence that this Assembly could put them first and set aside partisan differences.
They put politics first over there.
I think it would have been a worthy exercise, one that could have produced remarkable results. Tough anti-bullying legislation that would deal with bullying of all types and forms without the divisiveness of entrenched positions that are starting to take root. Even parents and media commentators were cheering this idea along. I'm going to quote a few more people, Speaker. On March 6th, the Toronto Sun's Moira MacDonald said about the bills, and I quote, "Both had their merits. The Conservatives' Bill 14 Anti-Bullying Act had a more all-encompassing focus on bullying compared to the Liberals' Bill 13, the Accepting Schools Act. Nevertheless, even Premier Dalton McGuinty said there was an opportunity for both parties to work together on a final bill."
Just words with them.
Alan Hubley wrote in the Ottawa Citizen, "I have personally met with a number of MPPs from all parties and believe they want to work together to develop a final bill that will enable schools to accomplish real action on the anti-bullying issue. This can only happen quickly if all parties agree to send the government's bill to committee for discussion and revision and to blend it with some good ideas from Mrs. Whitmer's bill." In fact, in this past December, Alan Hubley and his wife, Wendy, joined me at Queen's Park They met with Dalton McGuinty and Tim Hudak. They talked to Peter Tabbins and Laurel Broughton, and they shared stories with Christine Elliott and Elizabeth Whitmer. The Ottawa Citizen said of the day, they also wanted to tell the Premier to start working with the other side on this issue. The kids are watching us, said Hubley. This is important. Well, I agree with Alan Hubley. He has been a principal advisor to me on teenage mental health, youth suicide, and bullying. If I may say, he and Wendy are two of the strongest, kindest, and gentlest souls I have known in my life. They have put their own grief on the back burner so they can tell Jamie's story, because they don't want another family to go through the pain they are battling. And I don't want another family to go through the struggle that the Hubleys are facing. I'm certain that no one in this place wants another family to face the same sorrow that Alan and Wendy are feeling. Yet there are kids watching, and what they see is a Liberal government unwilling to admit they could have done better by working with others. Imagine using the Liberal slogan, going forward together. Those words could have been more than just catchy electioneering. And we could have presented to the public a first-class bill aimed at eradicating bullying of all kinds. Alas, it appears that sloganeering has won the day, Speaker, and I'm disappointed to say that we are debating an inferior bill to that of Mrs. Whitmer's. And therefore, even when this bill does eventually go to committee, it is likely not to produce the type of protection Ontarian students deserve because of the constraints of the legislative process. Now, this is where it becomes real, where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. Parliamentary procedure really doesn't matter that much, I'm sure you'll be aware, to mums and dads who are at their wits' end because their kids are being bullied and they're struggling with suicide.
That's right.
Parliamentary procedure to those people, Speaker, means nothing because they are going through something only some of us here, and hopefully many of us won't ever feel every day at their house. All they know is that they want their children protected. All the Hubleys want is their child back. And I'm certain they won't be able to understand why we couldn't break with parliamentary convention and work together and use a common sense starting point. I'm sure they won't be happy to learn that the minister was so entrenched in her own views. I'll even use the word. The minister was selfish.
Terrible.
Selfish. Not to accept that there are valid criticisms to her legislation, that there was a better way, that we could have worked together, we could have put partisanship aside, we could have improved her bill. But she was selfish. I know they'll be utterly disappointed back home to know that if you disagree with even one and or but in the minister's bill, you'll be labelled a bigot or a homophobe.
Terrible.
Bullying, of course, at its finest, and I must say that members of this Assembly have been targeted by that because there are significant challenges to any piece of legislation where you will want to bring in and bring attention to those flaws, and you will want to bring in amendments. All of us, regardless of party, could have given consent to put a process together that works for those kids who are hurting, for those parents who are at their wits' end, and for all of them who just want something done. Let me read you, Mr. Speaker, something that Ann Taylor recently wrote. We are calling on all parties to work together and take time for careful consideration over the drafting of a final bill. Bullying is an abusive in nature and is a result of intolerance, inequity, and misuses of power. In order to put an end to bullying and bullycide, we must use legislation to help build this framework. The language must be concise and specific regarding bullying and peer abuse. Our hope is to have a bill strictly devoted to anti-bullying for all students and to keep other issues of equality separate so that the bill's purpose is not distorted, making it about political reputations or narrowing the bullying focus instead of the safety and learning success of every single one of the children and youth in this province. I consider Bill 14 to be the gold standard of anti-bullying legislation because it is devoted to the anti-bullying of all of Ontario's students. A comparison document done by Mrs. Whitmer's office provides a detailed analysis of both 13 and 14, and it's clear that her bill is one that the legislature should be passing. Let me, Speaker, make this comparison because I think it's extremely relevant to where myself and Mrs. Whitmer are with respect to anti-bullying legislation. Bill's 14 definition of bullying is more thorough, focusing on what constitutes bullying and how it affects the victim. The Liberals' definition is preoccupied with the reason for bullying, whether it's gender, religion, race, and does not place enough emphasis on the form or outcome of bullying. The Liberal definition focuses on the perceived power imbalance based on the aforementioned individual factors. Our definition doesn't require specifically stating what the individual factors are, since it is designed and written to include all conceivable reasons one may be bullied. The PC definition includes the impact that bullying has on the school environment, the education process, and the victim's emotional well-being. Our definition is longer, more detailed, and therefore more comprehensive. The PC bill includes a section devoted solely to addressing cyberbullying. This is critical due to the increasing prevalence of internet-based bullying. The internet allows perpetrators to relentlessly bully and harass their victims 24 hours a day and often anonymously. The Liberal bill barely makes mention of cyberbullying, referring to it instead as an electronic form of bullying. Our bill prohibits the many different forms of cyberbullying, creating an anonymous web page, impersonating another person, communicating material to more than one person, or posting material on an electronic medium that can be accessed by more than one person. The Liberal bill requires school boards to issue biannual surveys to students in order to collect information on the efficacy of board policies and plans. The information is solely for internal board use. Our bill, the bill submitted to this Parliament by Elizabeth Whitmer, requires principals to track and to forward the number of bullying incidents that have occurred each year to their respective school boards. The board is then required to compile this information in a yearly report and to submit it to the ministry. The ministry will subsequently release this information in an annual report detailing the number of bullying incidents that has occurred provincially and what steps the ministry has taken to address bullying in schools. Our bill, the PC bill, recognizes that in order to make progress and improvements, the ministry and boards must have the necessary data. A major component of our Progressive Conservative bill is accountability. The Liberals fail to address this in its entirety. Our bill is much more robust in its requirement for the ministry and school boards to develop comprehensive bullying prevention plans. It requires the ministry to establish a provincial plan that will serve as the basis for each board's plan. The boards are mandated to develop their own plan and submit it to the ministry for approval. The bill stipulates what must be included in each plan. Bill 13, however, states that the minister, quote-unquote, may establish policies and guidelines with respect to bullying prevention. And I will touch on that a little bit later, Mr. Speaker, because it is an area of concern for many parents across Ontario. But let's continue to do this comparison. The Progressive Conservative bill requires principals to provide every student and parent and guardian with the board's prevention plan, as well as include the plan on the school website. The Liberal plan does not require that. The PC bill formalizes a process for investigating allegations of bullying. It also stipulates the duties of the principal following an investigation in which bullying has been deemed to have occurred. The Liberal bill does not include anything similar to this. The PC bill incorporates bullying prevention directly into the provincial curriculum, beginning in kindergarten and continuing throughout the elementary and secondary grades. This, Mr. Speaker, will enable the prevention of bullying. The Liberal bill, on the other hand, does not require this. Their bill focuses on discipline, which is reactionary and punitive, and from what we hear from parents, not workable. Our stakeholders, including parents of bullied kids, do not believe in expulsion. They believe in rehabilitation, something that I was talking about when I told you about the Bangles Against Bullies, or Be a Bangle, Not a Bully. That campaign that's happening in Ottawa is to make sure that kids are learning bullying is not acceptable and violence in the schools is not acceptable. The PC bill establishes mandatory remedial programs for perpetrators of bullying. They must be provided by boards and delivered by social workers, psychologists, or other trained professionals. It also stipulates that these programs must be made available for victims, albeit on a voluntary basis. The Liberal plan does not require perpetrators to attend remedial programs. That means the bully is still going to be out there without any necessary supports. So, it's problematic, Speaker. So, I would like at this point in time just to say a special acknowledgement to a member of Elizabeth Whitmer's staff, Dan Powers, for compiling those points for our caucus, who has taken a lot of his time to ensure that we got it right. As Karen Seven pointed out in the YorkRegion.com, and we've spoken about Karen before, and I quote, "The York Region Group, along with coalitions in St. Thomas, Elgin, and London, Blue Water Citizens for Education, and the youth-led Bullying Canada, released a statement this week raising grave concerns over Bill 13. If anti-bullying legislation is to be effective, they say, it should be all-encompassing to include bullying by school staff as well as students and provide families easy access to information. Ambiguous, vague, and unavailable bullying policies can allow administrators to diminish incidents," the release said. Further on it reads, "The group is asking all parties to leave politics at the door and work together with input from victims and their families to combine the Liberals' Bill 13 with the Progressive Conservative Bill 14, both tabled in December." Now, I've said many times in this House that if one student takes their own life, quits school, or self-harms after we pass a bullying law, we will have failed. And here we have a credible and impartial parent group, a group of them actually, parent groups, who have seen the effects of bullying firsthand, telling us in this chamber that Bill 13 is not as strong as Bill 14. They tell us that we need to check our politics at the door. In fact, Seven's York Region Anti-Bullying Coalition has linked arms with several other parent groups who I've mentioned earlier. They make critical arguments why Bill 13 is not as thorough as they would have hoped. Now, allow me to read into the record, Speaker, excerpts of an open letter the group released earlier this month. I might add, before I read this into the public record, I did place a copy of this letter on the desk of the minister a few weeks back, and I do hope she took time to read what this group has said. And it is quite lengthy, Speaker, so I will ask your indulgence as I read all of this information into the public record. They start, "It is vital to the success of our education system and the well-being of generations of children and young adults to reduce the incidence and impact of bullying. Without informed decision-making and effective legislation, every Ontario student remains at risk." There are two bills tabled. Two bills that have some good ideas, but two bills that don't go far enough. We beseech all parties to work together and take time for careful consideration over the drafting of a final bill, because once passed, the government of the day can claim there is no further need to look at bullying issues. and that time is needed to see how effective the new legislation is, and that will likely amount 2 years. The students of Ontario cannot afford to have any more ineffective legislation passed. They cannot afford any further Band-Aid approaches or wait-and-see attitudes. Comprehensive and effective legislation to the Education Act are needed to ensure that this province is doing its very best to keep students safe in its schools. Bullying is an abusive and results in intolerance, inequity, misuse of power. In order to put an end to bullying and bullycide, we must implement an anti-oppressive framework. If we are to use legislation to help build this framework, the language must be concise and specific regarding bullying and peer abuse. To integrate the problem of bullying with other school-based issues would in effect put the issue of bullying back on the back burner yet again. Our hope is to have a bill strictly devoted to anti-bullying for all students and to keep other issues of equality separate so that the bill's purpose is not distorted, making it about political reputations or narrowing the bullying focus, as I stated earlier. They go on to say it's vital to the success of our education system and the well-being of generations of children and young adults to reduce the incidence and impact of bullying. And then they outline, Speaker, a number of initiatives that they're concerned about. One is all-encompassing. Any definitions related to bullying, and they say Bill 14 has a thorough one, Bill 13 does not provide one, must be all-encompassing, pertaining to all members of the school communities. As victims and parents of victims, they say it doesn't matter what form of bullying takes, safeguards need to be written into the Education Act. That would prevent students from being harmed by all acts of bullying, including but not limited to homophobic acts and even and especially those acts carried out by those in positions of authority. We will continue to seek this and ask for nothing less than legislation that ensures that our children's bullying experiences are never repeated. Speaker, this is coming from concerned parents from across Ontario, from York Region, from London, from Elgin St. Thomas, from Kitchener. Right across this province, parents have banded together with their own ideas because they actually see this happening to their own children. They've actually have had to deal with some of the repercussions that bullying has had in their own family, in their own schools, and they're telling us how to get this right. They also say we need easy access to information. They say we have seen firsthand and have been made aware of many other cases how ambiguous, vague, and often seemingly unavailable bullying policies, procedures, and definitions allow administrators to diminish incidents and remove them from the realm of bullying altogether. Clear definitions are crucial and must cover all forms of bullying. Bill 14 covers this. Bill 13, not so much. They also talk about tracking and reporting, and I'm very proud that Mrs. Whitmer has made a very important and dedicated addition to her bill to ensure that there is going to be tracking and reporting. This anti-bullying coalition that represents so many of our communities across Ontario says all schools should be required to keep a quantitative and detailed record of all reports of bullying throughout each school year. The public should, again, have access to the quantitative information, which should be broken down to clearly show the total number of bullying incidents reported in a given year, the total number of reported incidents that, after investigation, were deemed to have been legitimate incidents of bullying, the total number of incidents that required disciplinary action, and the total number of incidents that required legal intervention in any capacity. Now, as I have mentioned on a number of occasions, and as the spirit of the legislation introduced by Mrs. Whitmer, this organization also believes, and a very key and important point, there should be support for all. Bills 13 and 14 both recommend offering support, assistance, and remedial programs to both victims and aggressors. The damage caused by bullying is not, however, limited to the bully's chosen victim. It is far more wide-reaching than that, as its effects are felt by family members as well. Early intervention is critical in attempting to avoid the years of psychological damage that can follow ongoing bullying attacks. Timing is of the essence when you're watching your child crumble and become suicidal. These are very important words from parents who are quite distressed. They believe there needs to be comprehensive policies for all school boards. Bill 13 would seem to suggest that school boards must establish their own policies and guidelines regarding bullying prevention and intervention, and that these policies must be approved by the Minister of Education. Their concern, Speaker, in this open letter, and I'll quote, "Inconsistent policies and guidelines in different boards across the province leads to little accountability, confusion and mismanaged time. One overarching and comprehensive policy for all of Ontario would be so much better." Let me give you an example. Let me take you back to that quote of October 27th, where I read to you about Jamie. Remember the batteries? Jamie was going to one school at that time, and his parents took him out of that school and put him in another school. In Ottawa, we have 4 different school boards. It is not impossible to see 4 different school boards have 4 different schools on the same street. And those 4 schools, Speaker, could end up having 4 different policies as a result of this minister's bill. Wow. Does that make any sense to you? No, it doesn't make any sense, and that's why Mrs. Whitmer has a far superior bill.
Consistent with Liberal policy.
This other group speaks to third-party oversight as well. They say the vast majority of these lawsuits are centred on bullying incidents and inadequate responses to keep students safe. You can sense their frustration when you read their letters. There is a clear need for third-party oversight in order to hold school boards accountable. I would argue that could be the minister if the minister was serious about getting this bill right. They talk about integrity and responsibility. Professional development programs on bullying must include information and instruction regarding incidents where teachers or administrators exhibit bullying behaviour towards students as witnessed by other teachers. Reporting duties need to apply even if the bully is a teacher or fellow staff member. There must be some form of legislation in place to protect teachers who come forward in order to protect bullying of victims of bullying or abuse at the hands of teachers. And then their final point, absolute accountability. And listen to this. In reading over Bill 13, there is a repeated use of the phrase, quote, "the minister may," unquote. In our experience, they say, policies and procedures that incorporate the use of the word, quote unquote, may, are virtually worthless to parents advocating for their broken children. The doors are left wide open for administrators to respond. Well, we're not required to do that, and that is exactly what so frequently happens. When it comes right down to it, the phrase, quote, "the minister may," unquote, really means the school board likely won't have to. These parents are frustrated, Speaker, and they've been asking this Assembly to act for many years now. We now have that golden opportunity, and it has been squandered. Terrible. We have a minority government. Every single voice in this legislature is now equal, and they can't handle that to protect these children. So their letter concludes by saying this: although we would like to be optimistic about the possibility of positive changes with tabling of Bills 13 and 14, instead we are concerned for Ontario families that are about to begin a lengthy period of time with no real improvement in the area of bullying prevention and no possibility of such. These points are a complete analysis, as I have said, done by a number of anti-bullying coalition organizations and parent groups and those who have been bullied across Ontario. They have been in the field for quite some time. They have credibility. The research that they have done and the expertise that they have brought to the table deserves to be listened to. They deserve to be heard. And it's important that that expert experience has been because of themselves and their own children. But they're not the only ones who've weighed in. Several Osgoode Law School, University of Toronto, and even some University of Ottawa students from my hometown have written to this Assembly with their concerns too. And let me quote what they have said, because when these legal minds come and view legislation from this Assembly, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to listen to what their criticisms might be. While we commend the goal of Bill 13 insofar as it addresses the need to eradicate bullying, we are concerned with the method and the scope of this bill in attempting to achieve quote-unquote bullying prevention and intervention. While bullying can single out traits such as race or sexual orientation, bullying is not limited to students displaying such traits. Rather, any and all students may become targets, whether for the size of one's body, for shyness, or for any other characteristic. Legislating that school boards empower only those students who lead clubs from one of the 4 explicitly protected groups, gender equality, anti-racism, respect for students with disabilities, and sexual orientation, sends a message that some grounds for bullying merit more attention and protection than others. Consequently, the scope of the bill is too narrow and exclusive to promote true equality for all potentially targeted traits and identities. Moreover, the bill is silent on character development and on creating a safe environment for speaking about bullying. They further say, and these are students at various law schools throughout the province of Ontario, I will reiterate, they are from Osgoode Law School, the University of Toronto, and from the University of Ottawa. This bill's sections on disciplinary measures similarly gives explicit attention and protection to issue-specific causes. Section 4.2 lists the general term bullying, along with sexual assault, gender-based violence, and incidents based on homophobia. Sex and gender-related issues are not the only motives behind bullying or violent behavior. So that is interesting. They say, finally, we suggest that such license may alleviate or marginalize students whose conscientious beliefs may not align with the dominant views of school boards about what merits punitive sanctions. It's interesting, but they're not alone. There are still more groups that have come out, including one of the largest teachers' unions in all of Ontario, ETFO. They have written to Mrs. Whitmer to express some support for her legislation. And I will read into the record this, and I know my time is getting down there, Speaker. Given the increase in reports of serious student bullying, including bullying that has led to students committing suicide, it is no coincidence that there are 2 bills before the House seeking to strengthen public schools' capacity to address serious antisocial behaviour on the part of students. In its analysis of Bill 13, this submission will also make reference to specific provisions of Bill 14, the Anti-Bullying Act, sponsored by MPP Elizabeth Whitmer. There are aspects of this private member's bill that would strengthen the framework for responding to incidents of bullying and should inform amendments to Bill 13. As a mum, I want to see strong anti-bullying legislation pass this legislature. But as the Coalition has said, Bill 13 will not solve the problems. It will not give us the desired results. For that reason, both emotionally and intellectually, I don't feel I can support the Liberal bill at this time. Will that change at committee? As hopeful as I am, Speaker, I am not optimistic. In fact, I'm a realist. And having negotiated with this Liberal Party for the past number of months to try and put kids first and their protection first at the expense of partisanship, I've now seen what they've done. I've now seen them unilaterally call this bill. While we believed in the official opposition, the negotiations were still ongoing to put the very good ideas of Mrs. Whitmer into that bill. And as we have seen today, there are a number of other ideas that have come from across the province, from people who are desperate, who need our help, who want us to work together so that we can end bullying in our schools. They wanted us to do that together, Mr. Speaker. I don't see Bill 13 as being particularly relevant to students in every case, and without Mrs. Whitmer's bill fully included in Bill 13, this bill is incomplete. And it's an incomplete bill that will not solve all of the bullying-related problems that Ontario students are confronted with. Yet, if Bill 13 does pass, the Liberals will claim that they have acted, that they have done everything, that they are going to eradicate bullying in Ontario. They are going to pat themselves in the back, Mr. Speaker, and they're going to be proud of themselves, and it will be a wonderful day to be a Liberal in Ontario. Yet the problem for them will be that if we fail one more kid in this province after we pass their bill and they didn't get it right, it will be a very big problem, not just for them, but for all of us. I have said from the get-go, including earlier in these remarks, if one more kid commits suicide, self-harms, or drops out of school because of bullying, we will have failed. I'm not interested in the back-patting competition of this Liberal government. I think we can do better. We must remember why we are here, to make Ontario a better place for all Ontarians, not just some. All, not just the strong, but also the weak, not just the straight, but also the gay, not just the thin, but also the smart, and not just the weak in the learning abilities, but also those people who are working hard, not for the overweight, not just for the learning disabled. Mr. Speaker, we have to protect all Ontarians, regardless of why they're being bullied. That is our job. That is why we were sent here, and we cannot continue, Mr. Speaker, to have any more of these problems in our schools. That is the issue. That is why we believed on this side of the House we could have done something remarkable with each of our equal voices here. Instead, this is a government so focused on controlling the agenda, they gave a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity up. They squandered an ability to take all of the good ideas and put them together. They chose to make a splashy headline at the expense of kids.
Terrible.
I'm utterly disappointed, and I'm very disappointed that they broke faith with this House on this bill. But, Speaker, this isn't the first time. They've done this before. Not exactly this way.
They're old tricks.
But let's go back a week ago when this Assembly decided to vote for a select committee to investigate Orange. This House stood and passed a motion to review what happened at Orange. We've been asking for that minister to step aside. We wanted someone to be accountable. So just like this bullying bill where they were negotiating and they broke the negotiations, they've also broken faith with this House. And for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I move adjournment of the House.
The ayes being 29 and the nays being 39, I declare the motion lost. I now return to the member for Nepean Carleton, who still has the...
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Speaker. I truly do appreciate the opportunity to have participated in this debate. Mr. Speaker, I do understand that the former Minister of Community Safety that used to be in charge of protecting kids in this province is heckling me over an important bill that people want to have their say on. My understanding is that we have an ability to debate this piece of legislation. If that Liberal government didn't want to have to deal with 30-minute bills and delays, then they should call a select committee and they should put Bill 13 and 14 in committee together. But what are they going to do instead? Instead, what they're going to do is heckle, drown us out, shout down the opposition because Dalton McGuinty thinks he's got something called a major minority.
Member for Nepean Carleton.
I do appreciate to talk about this important issue. It's one that I've raised several occasions. I hear the little chirpers over there. They weren't here for the hour in which I discussed how important passing effective anti-bullying legislation was. They didn't hear the voices that I brought to this chamber on behalf of the parents in York Region, in London, St. Thomas, in areas across the province like Kitchener and Ottawa who are concerned about this issue. I'm going to conclude today, I have about 5 minutes left, by reading something from Alan Hubley. This is one issue where partisan politics and special interest agendas should not get in the way of the ultimate goal, protecting kids from bullying. Personally, what I want to have in the final bill, and what I believe every parent in Ontario can support, is as follows. Support for student-led initiatives is key to giving kids the ability to help each other. My son Jamie wanted to start a club where every child who felt out of place could join and gain peer support. He talked about tall, short, thin, fat, and kids with freckles who could benefit from a safe place and the acceptance by others. My son and this club would help kids learn to accept the differences in each other. Politicians need to forget about trying to name the groups that may form in schools. My son Jamie said kids today don't like labels like that anyway. We want to memorialize children who have taken the ultimate step that we don't want them to take. Speaker, we have to work together. I said we must remember why we are here. To make Ontario a better place for Ontarians. Not some, but all. Not just the strong, but also the weak. Not just the straight, but also the gay. Not just the thin, nor just the smart, but for overweight and learning disabled. Speaker, my favorite hymn on church, and I don't get there very often because when I get home on Saturday and Sunday, I do spend it with my daughter. But I do have a favorite hymn. And I looked it up, I Googled it because I didn't know all the words. But it's called Hope is a Star. It says, the last shall be first, and the weak shall be strong, and none shall be afraid. Please remember that's our task. It is to make sure Ontario students, when they go to school, aren't afraid. And as my friend Alan Hubley has said to us on a number of occasions, the kids are watching us. Let's get this right. Let's adjourn debate. Let's adjourn debate. Let's put these two bills into committee. Let's renegotiate. Why did they walk away? Is it the same reason they walked away from having a select committee on Orange? Yep. Is it the same reason that they can't give up control because of their so-called major minority? I am disgusted, and I will move adjournment of debate.
Right on.
The ayes are 33, the nays are 40.
The ayes being 33 and the nays being 40, I declare the motion lost. I again return to the member for Nepean Carleton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I do appreciate the opportunity to continue debate. For those members who are staying seated, I don't have any more opportunities to call you on not calling a select committee, so there won't be another 30-minute bell. However, I do know that there will be other members of the Progressive Conservative Caucus that will continue to call for a select committee in the House, given the issues that have surrounded.
Resign. It's time for Deb to resign.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to call.
Member for Nepean Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, I can't believe they're actually protesting us, protesting them for not